we need to talk about From my perspective, Blade Runner, the 1982 Blade Runner, is a film that it wasn't begging for a sequel. In that it was already pretty much a masterpiece. I seem to get the impression a lot of people don't have the same kind of overarching view of it as a film, more as a sort of artistic piece that influenced a lot of things, but if it really works as a film, and it's been borrowed from by sci-fi culture, music videos.
When I directed the original Blade Runner 35 years ago,
And there's even earlier established science fiction films that have, without a shadow of a doubt, just used it like a free resource to sort of add an edge of authenticity and je ne sais quoi to their tired bones. And the fact is that culture seems to still be having a conversation with the original Blade Runner film today, to the point where our cityscapes are seemingly a product of Ridley Scott's imagination at this point. There will be, I warn you now, major to both films, and even elements of the source material, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. The narrative of Blade Runner 2049 pretty much runs like this. Kay, played by Ryan Gosling, is a slave, Nexus 9 slave, who has an upgrade that means he cannot disobey an order, and he cannot disobey his slave owners. And so he is trusted as a Blade Runner to go around retiring the earlier serial numbers of his own kind, 8 and downwards. He does all this retiring under the watchful eye of his owner, Robin Wright's character, Lieutenant Joshi. And Robin Wright's very good in this, head of the Blade Runner unit that he works for. He labors under this terrible depression about it all. He's made his peace with killing members of his own kind, but he's not too happy about it, obviously, and his only consolation is his own sort of kind of lesser slave of his. He has a lesser slave in the form of his holographic girlfriend, Joy. After the retirement of a Nexus 8, played by Dave Bautista, Kay discovers the remains of a body. And not just any old body, but we're talking Rachel, Sean Young's character from the original film. So when they further examine the body, they find out that she had given birth to a child 30-odd years before. So somewhere running around is a 30-odd-ish year old replicant, firstborn of the replicant kind. Basically, Robin Wright's character then says, "There's a wall! There's a wall between..." She doesn't say it like that would be ridiculous, but basically it's a threat to state, the idea of replicants having children. So he has to track it down and kill it. Now he has to kill something with a soul from his perspective, and he's not too chuffed. Pretty soon, his investigation gets the attention of Neander Wallace. Tyrell's organization's gone. He is the one-man institution that's replaced Tyrell. He wants the replicant child so he can examine that person and experiment on them. To do this, he employs his love, his right-hand chick, who is part PA, part chairman of the board, part killing machine. And she takes a violent interest in Kay's case. Anyway, in the meantime, Kay and his hollow girlfriend experience, Joy, find out that the Kay might be the replicant messiah, firstborn, whatever. And they, that leads him down a rabbit hole of running away from the naggiest supporting female characters in cinema history, like a gaggle of them, and straight to where Harrison Ford's Deckard is hiding out for presumably a hug. All films have some kind of plot or narrative, but the best films tend to be willing to sacrifice their plot for the story, which is often slightly separate. You look at the Maltese Falcon, for example. The plot is about the Maltese Falcon, this mythical bird thing that everyone's going to make a ton of money off of because it's so valuable and special and all this bullshit. But it's actually about Sam Spade not wanting to get turned over by this girl that he clearly cannot trust, and he's fallen in love with her. He kind of just wants to survive her, really, but he also wants to help her, but he also wants to solve the mystery of his business partner's death. And, that's the story. In this, as best as I can tell, the closest thing that this film can glom onto as a story is Kay and his holographic girlfriend. That seems to be it. Kay and his holographic girlfriend, is their relationship real? Honestly, that seems to be the only story worth talking about, because everything else is just flip-flopping from idea to idea. The other issue with him, the main issue with him as a main character, he's not the main character. Deckard is the main character. I'm sorry. No, sorry, bad joke. Bad joke. You're not the main character. I am. I know it's a dick move, but I wanted you to leave me alone with my dog in Vegas. This happens to him where he finds out first he's not the Messiah, and then he realizes that maybe his relationship with Joy was more in his head than anywhere else. And those things should be a revelation. It should be devastating. We should be with him at that point. And you're trying to be. And you can see that Ryan Gosling's doing his best, and you can see that the film wants you to feel that pain. But instead, especially the part where Joy is there as a big hologram, not the Joy he knows and whatever, he kind of just turns into Marv from Sin City. Hey, I was haunted by a dame, and I'm gonna go kill somebody, and it's important to remember to take your medication. What's going on? Hey kid, that's one damn fine coat you're wearing. When I first watched this film, I did feel like they'd felt that there weren't enough female characters in it. They'd recognized there weren't enough female characters in it, and they just flung a bunch of underdeveloped female characters into the mix. Like, the film is plastered with images of sensualized, overly sexualized female forms of holograms and statues and whatnot. It's a kind of cyberpunk staple. There are like 7 female characters in this film, and they're not particularly well fleshed out. Straight off the bat, Robin Wright's character is kind of underwritten, kind of underdeveloped. She's really impressive, though. That's Robin Wright has done that, not the development of the character. The next character is Sylvia Hoeks, plays Love. She seems to be the only actor to play a replicant in the film who understands the kind of autistic flip-flopping of emotional distress caused to somebody who's had emotions, who's learned very quickly about their emotions, had it foisted upon them, doesn't really understand it, and they're an artificial biological construct. I mean, you could argue that maybe there's meant to be a kind of like shadow matriarchy fighting the obvious patriarchy of the dystopia. That'd be a great film. I'd want to watch that film, but that has to work for that to sell.
I love you.
You don't have to say that.
I know.
Ana de Armas does a pretty stand-up job of playing the most supportive girlfriend in the world. And it's a thankless fucking task. And she does it without seeming too awkward. What it is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the original novel on which Blade Runner is based, is a different animal to Blade Runner. And I think Julie comes from a kind of more of an intellectual place than you might imagine, because in the original novel, Iran is Deckard's wife. They're not happy because they live in a world that's increasingly emptying out as people go to the colonies. And he wants to cheer her up, and he wants to get them both back to this place. And then these mood organs, and if you have it the right setting, you wake up in a good mood even though you live in a shit world. And she doesn't like no organ. She's sick of the organ, and she doesn't want it, and she's had enough of it, which is probably a metaphor for the sex life. And she just doesn't want to be happy in a place where it's not logical to be happy. And he figures if he buys a real sheep, like they used to have, they have an electric sheep. If he buys a real sheep, he'll be happier anyway. He'll be validated through consumer culture. So he kills as many fucking replicants, they're not called replicants, called Andes, as possible so that he can get his mood up again. By the time he gets to the end of the story, he's gone for a moral quagmire, killed a whole bunch of androids, and kind of hates himself and thinks he's got a real frog, but turns out it's an electric frog, and he's really depressed. And his determined to be unhappy wife, for good reason, decides to rally to the cause and cheer him up. And like, it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right. Somewhere in there, somewhere in that dynamic of the original book, they've wrapped all of that into joy, and they've done quite a good job of representing that aspect of the book. And if it was just a representation of those elements of the book, I'd be happy enough, because joy is kind of, Kay is the one who's kind of depressed for good reason, and joy is both the desire to buy a sheep. She's very much a kind of construct of a bunch of different elements of that aspect of Do Androids Dream, of Electric Sheep, the consumer culture and all of that, the kind of the need to be, she's the mood organ and the wife and the consumer culture. That's all cool. That's quite impressive. If that's what they've done, I think that's what they've done. It's quite impressive that they've pulled that off. But it stops there. She stops being impressive there.
How can it not know what it is?
The way is Deckard a replicant or not question is handled in this film is done in two ways, unfortunately. Because the first way is perfect and should have been left there. And the second way, and it says everything you need to know about this film. It flip-flops. It cannot decide. When Kay first meets Deckard, he finds Deckard. They have this punch-up, shootout sequence that kind of feels like... it feels more like it came from the book. It kind of is trippy and like long-winded and kind of funny. It's funny enough. It's like I said, there's some wit in the film. But eventually they sit down and have a drink. And Deckard pours Kay a drink, pours himself a drink, pours some booze on the floor for the dog. Kay asks about the dog, is it real? Nice dog, is it real? He goes, I don't know. Ask him, says Deckard. It's perfect. That's the replicant question. Done. Sorted. Later, however, Deckard is kidnapped by Love and taken to Neander Wallace's lair of meh. Neander Wallace, played by Jared Leto, as we've established, who's convincingly slimy, and then beyond that he's just sort of, oh, you were meant to be together with Rachel, you were designed to meet and fall in love so we could have babies. And then Wallace turns around and says, oh, but I don't really fucking know, because in the blackout of 2022, everything changed. And then he brings up Sean Young. Sean Young turns up, some CGI version of Sean Young with an actress that doesn't look that much like her. It's just like, what? Originally, Wallace was conceived as a character that was somewhere along the lines of David Bowie. And when you realize you don't have David Bowie, you go, but I need somebody interesting. You don't go Jared Leto. Do you know what I mean? You don't. I'm not knocking the guy completely. I'm just saying, like, that's not interesting enough. You go like William Dafoe, Tilda Swinton, Crispin Glover, Christopher Walken as Neander Wallace. What's the secret of man's red fire? You know, no, I'm joking. Of course. I want your child. I want the child so that I can make more like it. You know, you want a drink? I gotta get you a drink. Do you want a version of your old girlfriend? You know, I get that. It's not a problem. I'm blind. In all fairness, I'm glad they made this film. I'm glad that it was full of ideas, even though it was kind of a snore fest that was overly packed. I'm glad that it had good ideas rather than it having no ideas and beating me over the head with stupidity to try and make me dumb enough to actually enjoy it. My issue with the film is too clunky a collection of the ideas. They don't come together in a flow. They come at you, boom, 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 boom. There's like no breathing space for one idea when the next idea hits you. Look, Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner had to go through hell and high water to be recognized for what it is, which is a masterpiece of style as substance.
Commerce.
Like substance weaved into the layers of style, the world building. Probably the best world builder in cinema is Ridley Scott. Like this film is it's no slouch and no stakes. The cinematography is beautiful. Roger Deakins really pulls it out of the bag, and Dennis Gassner as the production designer really does something very special. And it irked me a little when I first watched it that the production design seems to have taken, much like the writing, seems to have taken out the gaudy Mobius 2000 AD comic strip vibe of the original film, almost as if the writers and the production designers and everybody else is trying to take the genie of Blade Runner and squeeze it back into the bottle of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, trying to take the cartoonish cyberpunk cinema, almost as if they're ashamed of it, and try to put it back into this very sensible literature bottle. To see them try to tame it kind of annoyed me, but at the same time, they took it and captured the dreamscape of the original film really, really well, creating their own dreamscape as well, which is no bad thing. Blade Runner doesn't feel like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. It feels like its own thing. Blade Runner 2049, to its credit, feels like its own thing, within the keeping of those other two works, but very much its own thing, and it deserves a lot of credit for that. It wasn't the worst time I spent in the cinema, but I kind of just wanted it to be better. I wanted it to have the lightness of touch and the subtlety of the original. Shit. Space booze is not something you want to be drinking while waving around a loaded weapon. So please place your weapon in a safe place before you pour yourself some delicious space booze.
Space booze.
Yep. It's about 120%. Oh, look at that neon glow. It comes from it being filtered through the heart of a dead star. And if you believe that shit, you'll believe anything. The fact of the matter is, they filter it through the engine system with antifreeze and rocket fuel, and that's kind of what gives it its buzz. Oh, that's good shit.